Today, we are going to learn a different type of measurement. In our chapters, we learned about measuring time. But normally, when we think about measuring, we think about measuring in inches or feet or centimeters or meters. Last year in second grade, you learned about the ruler and measuring in inches or centimeters on it. Today, we're going to learn about measuring objects to the nearest inch, half inch, and quarter inch. This means we're going to have to look at the lines on an inch ruler. We know from last year in second grade that a ruler has 12 inches. All rulers can look different, so it's important to know some of the main parts of any ruler when measuring. There are a lot of lines on a ruler, and sometimes they can have inches and centimeters on the same one. Since we're only focusing on inches today, we're going to use this ruler on the screen with the lines that you see to measure. We can think about a ruler similar to how we thought about fractions. Each inch on a ruler is exactly the same length apart, but can be split up into many pieces. It's kind of like how a whole can be split up into many fraction sizes. Some rulers have many lines, like the one above. We'll focus on inches, which are the whole numbers that my red arrow is pointing to, half inches, which is the blue arrow, and quarter inches, which is the yellow arrow. Looking closer at that ruler and those three arrows, we can see how close all of the lines are. This is why it's extra important to know what each line represents. We can think about the inch in 4 parts like a fraction. You can also think about all of the spaces between an inch into more parts. For us, since we're talking about a quarter inch and we know that a quarter is the same as 1/4, we'll think about it with 4 parts. 1/4 of an inch would be the same as one piece of a fraction, 1/4. If you look at this other model of a ruler, you'll see that there is a 1/4, but then there's a 1/2. Think about how a 1/2 inch would be like 2 pieces of our fraction. 3/4 inch would be like 3 pieces of our fraction. Already you can see that the yellow ruler has less lines than the white ruler. So we're only focusing on the quarter and half inch lines. Let's talk about half inches. The regular inches on a ruler are easy to see because the numbers are right there for you. Half inches are the next easiest because they are located right in the middle of each inch number. The lines for half inches are also a little bit longer. If you notice, all of the half inches have a blue arrow above them in my picture. The line is a little bit longer for each half inch. Also notice that the blue arrows are pointing at the regular whole inch numbers too. They overlap with whole inches, just like in a fraction when you have 1/2 and 1/2 making a whole. The yellow arrows in this picture show quarter inches. They're closer together because quarter inches are smaller. The lines for quarter inches are also short and sometimes tricky to see. Notice that the 1/4 or 1/4 inch mark is the only line that is actually labeled as 1/4. This is because if you took 1/4 or 1/4 of an inch and another quarter of an inch, you would get 2/4 or 1/2. 3 parts of that inch would be 3/4, and 4 parts of that inch would make one whole. Even though our model only shows between 0 and 1 inches, remember back to one of our first slides where we reviewed that the same space happens in between every single inch. When we count the tick marks on a ruler, it's important to think back to counting fractions. Let's practice with some examples. Remember to think about lining up the object at 0 on the ruler. Remember to look for the line on the ruler where the object stops. And remember counting by quarters or fourths to find the nearest length. Here we have a picture of a pencil. I'm going to move my ruler to line up with the edge of the pencil at 0. I can see that the tip of my pencil is a little bit past the 5. So I'm going to zoom in. If I'm zooming in, I notice that the tip of my pencil comes past the 5, but not yet to the ½ mark. I have to think back to what this line would represent. If it's in between 5 inches and 5½ inches, I know that I can read this length as 5¼ inch. Let's try the next example. Here I have a picture of a microphone. I'm going to drag my ruler to the edge of my microphone so it starts at 0. I can see that on this ruler, it passes the 4 but is not yet at the 5. To me, it looks like 4½, but I need a closer look to make sure. When I zoom in on my ruler and my microphone, I see that the microphone passed the ½ line, but it's not yet at the ¾ line. It lands pretty close or directly on the 4½ line, making this microphone 4½ inches long. Let's try one more example. Here I have a picture of a swordfish. This swordfish gets a little trickier because it has a tail that doesn't stop at one point. When I move my ruler over, I'm still going to line it up at 0. This time, though, I need to focus on where the swordfish picture ends, since I want to measure the longest part of my picture or my object. Let's zoom in and see where the picture of my swordfish lands. When I zoom in, I can see that the edges of the swordfish's tail come out past 8 inches. The swordfish's tail is not to 9 inches yet. It's not landing on my ½ inch or my ¾ inch. If I were to draw a line on my paper, it would land at 8½ inches. Some things to remember when you're doing your assignment today is to use a ruler with starting at 0 on whatever object you are measuring, and to make sure that you're looking closely. If it helps you to draw a line like I did in my examples, that would be a great idea. I will link a virtual ruler for you to use on your assignment in Google Slides today. As always, let me know if you have any questions.